All right, so in this module, we're going to go over the assignments from last week. Talk a little bit about those. That's going to lead us into discussing the rule of thirds. That'll be one of the modules in this week's lesson. And we are going to then jump into drone deploy. So let me show you how some of this is going to work. Let's pop over to our images. So see, these are just a few of the images that were turned in on the high altitude assignment. Oh, hold on. I'm just showing you me. There we go. These are some images of our high altitude shots. Now, I want to look at these and kind of talk about these. And remember, I did not give anyone specific instructions about how I wanted the shots. That's because I just wanted to get you up there and fly. We're now going to critique some of these shots. It gives us an opportunity to see some of the things that went wrong. And I don't want anyone to get offended or say, well, you didn't tell me I had to do great photography. You're absolutely right. The intention was not to get you to focus on great photography. It was just to get you in the air, get your high altitude shot. And by doing so, it's going to give us some images that we can actually talk about. So when I look at this particular image, I want you to start keeping in mind as we go through these that when you start taking pictures now with your drone, you have to be thinking about taking pictures for a customer. And so we want to start looking at the quality of our drone image. We want to start digging into the settings within our drone image, in our settings within our drone settings there right on our phone. There's a lot of camera settings that we can adjust. And for now, I want you to make sure those are set on auto so they can do a lot of that work for you until you kind of learn how to do those. Let's take a look at this one, and we could look at this image and wonder, oh, maybe we're highlighting the boats. Maybe we're highlighting the new deck that somebody wants an image of their deck. Not real sure what it is, but I mean, I think overall you have a well-centered photo. I love how the light comes in over here in the corner. And one of the neat things that you need to, that happened here that you need to start looking at when you start considering the images that you're taking is the time of day that you're taking images. Obviously, as we see here, this is close to noon, where those shadows are very minimal. And imagine if that sun was further down on either side of this image. Whoa. On either side of that image, we would get a lot more shadowing. And if we got a lot of this boat shadowing over the deck, it may not be the image we're looking for. Although if you got a perfect shadow of the boat along the deck, maybe that reflection of the shadow of the boats might be the visual effect that you're looking for. So you just kind of have to go through each one of those as you do that. So now let's move on to the next one. All right, so this image, I really love this image. I think what really gets me is the color, the clarity, the quality of this resolution. Perfect time of day. Whenever we took it, we're not casting very many shadows. Excellent image. In this particular case, it makes sense for this to be symmetrical and centered right in the middle of our image. So a lot of neat things happening here. I actually had to look at it a couple of times, because there's no sand here. And you're like, what in the world am I looking at here? So awesome. Really good image. All right, so when we look at this image, again, I want you to start taking into consideration and asking yourself, what are you highlighting? In this particular image, we could definitely be highlighting the front of this building from this vantage point. And you're going to see later how this definitely falls within the rule of thirds, that it's down here in this lower third of the image. I might even take this picture a little further back the drone back up and come a little bit down on my altitude. So maybe I get rid of some of this stuff in the back and keep this here. See what that looks like. I might even raise the camera up from this perspective and bring this into the lower part of the screen to pick up this skyline up here. It's going to depend on what you're looking for, but when you do something like this, take several different images, so when you get back to your lab and you're looking at these, you can figure out what you think came out as the best. Really great resolution. You can see all the ponding on this brand new roof that was just installed not too long ago. These particular images are not what we would want if we were trying to do a roof inspection. You see the resolution on those is really bad. We would do an orthomosaic image, and we'll learn about that later on. But it does give you just a little bit of insight here as we're looking at these images. So really good, not too much shadowing. The colors look really good. The light saturation looks great. I like that one. I just love where this house is located. How cool is that to be right at the crossroads of Oklahoma? I really don't know where that's at, but it is a really good image. It looks like I think that it's placed right in the upper thirds. I don't know, you could have maybe even moved that over here if you want to play with the rule of thirds, or maybe it right here and had something else in. But because you've got these two roads, I kind of like the artistic. The only question I might have is what happened to my color saturation? Something's off, and maybe it's just this is a really dry part of town, and there's just not a lot of color left because of this. And this image came from David way down south. So he may be a lot hotter and a lot drier than we are. You can see his pond shrinking up. So maybe, depending on what I'm trying to highlight in this, if I'm trying to be artistic, maybe it works. Maybe it goes into Photoshop and fix the colors just a little bit. I really like the image. I really do like the placing. But this road that splits between it, I think is really awesome. I love it. Okay. Gosh, these folks use way too much water. So resolution is great. The quality of the shot is great. You got high altitude. If you haven't seen The Truman Show, this kind of makes me think of The Truman Show. And that's where we should have our end of the year party. Really great, beautiful colors. Not much of a critique except to ask the question, start thinking of the question, what is it we're taking a picture of? What are we highlighting? And if we were doing this for a customer, we might figure out what it is we're trying to show. If we're trying to show the entire neighborhood, do we back out of this and create a larger image? Or in some cases, we take this image, let's see if I can make this work. We take this image of this street here, and then we take down the middle, and then we move over here and take down that street, and then we actually stitch them all together in a stitching program, and we can actually make those. The only thing that I think that we probably should have done here is raise the gimbal up just a little bit so I can see out to the horizon. Otherwise, it looks kind of flat. Looks kind of Truman Show. Okay, it's actually a very good image. I love the colors. And at first I thought this was fake until I found this yard here that actually has enough shade that this grass is dying off, and realized that, okay, this is not a fake Truman world. These people really just throw a lot of water out on their lawn. Love it. Okay, this image here, I think this image is great. I think this image is just really a wonderful shot. You see how far back we got, and we got the entire horizon, the water towers. You're seeing a lot of contrast between what's close and far. Um, Great time of day, no shadowing, perfect coloring. To me, I'm highlighting the campus and the neighborhood. It looks really good. Super, super, super good image. So this particular image, I think, really works, and it also kind of fits in the rule of thumbs. I think rule of thirds a little bit, as these buildings are off here in this third of the space, and you'll see that in the later lesson. But something happened with us with our lighting. If we look in here and try to figure out what's going on, there's a little bit of shadowing, but there's something wrong with the drone settings here, because we should have had an image look like this. So we don't have enough exposure, and that's something that you can look at. We'll look at later. We'll talk as we talk about exposures. There's a few settings that will take burst images, and it'll take a burst image at kind of an auto ISO, just kind of an auto shutter setting, and then it'll take an image overexposed and underexposed, and so it'll pop all those at the same time, and it bursts your multiple shots, and you can actually pull those multiple shots out and use one of those multiple shots, or they can be combined together in like a Photoshop program where you can get the best of both worlds. So in the areas like back here where we're underexposed, we can bring the exposure up on that, and maybe, I don't really see overexposure, but we can preserve the exposure rating here because the building looks to be properly exposed. So anyways, we'll look at that as we go further. Wanted to show you this because there's a exposure problem on this image. Again, just another good altitude shot, depending on what you're doing. So let's just pretend that we were trying to do some real estate photos with this. We really want to raise that up, lower the drone, and pull in a little bit more of the surrounding area. If we're trying to get, say, more of a building footprint or a roof inspection, we would want then to be more centered over the roof with a 90-degree gimbal, and you'd want this to fill up somewhere between 80 and 90% of your image. Another really good shot. I think that everything worked perfect for us. There is a little bit of shadowing, but I think it works really well. You can see back here along the back of the building where we have the shadow of these trees, and I think the shadowing that we get from these trees onto the lake really make a great effect. Something that we could probably do in Photoshop is remove these shadows. Again, if we took that picture with the burst, we could remove those shadows so that the grass looked like this. And maybe even over here, maybe not. Maybe this looks good to be nice and cozy, but for our image, we want to get rid of this. So if you're doing something, say, for the university for a brochure, everything looks really good from this angle except these two shadows. Again, we can't always take it during 12 o'clock. But again, we may really like this mirroring effect that these trees make. We can use photo fixing programs to get that out of there. All right, so really great images overall. These weren't everyone's images. They were just enough that we could actually get through a conversation and talk about what some of the things we need to do. All right, what else do I have here? So I'm just going to go and show you this real quick before I dive into anything else. You're going to have a lecture this week about the rule of thirds that I want you to go through, and I'm not going to get into the rule of thirds except for to show you that if you go into the drone and select camera and you highlight this button here. So right now you see it's highlighted and these are not. You click them one more time and they'll turn dark like these. So this means on, and what will happen when that is on is this display. Actually, this display is this on also, and that is this hash mark that you see here. But when you learn about the rule of thirds, you may want to go into those camera settings and turn on the rule of thirds. So now that you have those grids, and so this is just an image of the drone pointing at the wall, but if you're looking at your subject and you have these grid lines on there, you can place the subject in that space, whatever works best for what you're doing. All right, drone deploy. Let's look at drone deploy. So it's dronedeploy.com. I recommend you do this from your laptop or desktop so that you have access to a little bit easier features. Create an account. You'll get a little bit more assets than what I have with your trial. Don't worry, do not pay anything for it. Just do the demo version, and when the trial runs out, you'll still be able to use Drone Deploy. So we're going to click up here in the upper right hand corner. We're going to go to dashboard, and we're going to talk about mission planning. And that's going to be one of your assignments this week is mission planning. Let me give you a quick look at a couple of examples of missions that were already completed. This particular mission was to film this drive lane. So you see how we've got it pulled out here. That's where the drone's actually going to fly. And if you notice, each of these lines represent the path that the drone's going to take. All right, let's look at a couple more, and then we'll build one. Let's see if this one, how this one looks. Okay, so this was a mission that I flew, and it was a night mission and a day mission. There was actually one of each, but this is a 90-degree gimbal doing a roof inspection. And you see here, this is the path that the drone would take. So let's just go back here and let's do a couple of projects. So we're going to create a project. You can go anywhere that you want to go and do a project by putting the name, the zip code, the coordinates, the address, or just move it around where you want to go. So let's find something right here in the area that we want. I'm going to go do, let's do this roof inspection real quick. Okay, so the way this assignment's going to work is you're going to get a handful of pretend missions that you're going to want to go fly. And this is how it's going to work. So, for example, you might have one that says roof inspection, and you're going to create your project here. And we don't need to name it, but you can name it. Now, we're going to look over here in the upper left-hand corner. These is what we're going to look at. We're going to go into our standard maps. That's where we're going to spend most of our time, and we're going to talk about all the buttons on the side and what the buttons do. So you'll want to refer back to this if you go out and have troubles with your drone deploy. So here we go. Let's look at this. Now, remember we just talked about this past week, we talked about flying in restricted airspace. And if y'all remember when I showed you on the map that I lived in a restricted airspace that was at 200 feet. So pretty close to where I live. I live back in here in this neighborhood, and we're at 200 feet. So let's just say we're at 200 feet. The customer may want 200 feet, may want 150 feet. we're going to go through and look at these different things. Let's say, for example, that they want 150 feet. A couple ways I can do that. I can drag to 150 feet, or I can type numbers in there and tab off 200 feet, 150 feet. You can do this on your cell phone. It's a little bit more difficult because it's smaller, but it's still very doable. Now I'm going to left click on this and drag it to my building dimensions because I don't want everything. I'm just trying to get the building. And I'm telling you, the least amount of time you can spend in the air, the better you're going to be to move on about your day, do other things, save batteries. It's really going to make a big difference. Now, I want you to notice how we have this pattern. It works. It's not the ideal pattern because we have this oblong piece that comes out here. So one of the ways we do that is by clicking, I'm left clicking on this plus, and it makes me a new point. And so now I can take that point and straighten it here. Let's see if I can get that start out of the way. We're going to click that point so you can barely see it. We're going to grab it, and we're going to make that. Whoops. Okay, so here's something that you need to learn. Once this kind of happens where you get your mojo all out, you could do what I'm doing now and just remove it. You can also go back and delete the map and start over. Whatever works best. So when you do this, you want to make sure that you have a little bit over the edge so that there's some overlapping. Because what's going to happen here is this drone is going to actually go out and it's going to fly this mission. And it's going to take pictures. And these pictures are going to overlap each other. And then we're going to go back to a processing software and we're going to process this stuff. All right, so let's go over here and look at what all these buttons do. So the Enhanced 3D, this gives you a separate pattern, a separate crossing pattern. So I want you to watch how this happens here. You see the stuff in white. When I add the Enhanced 3D, it's going to go all the way around the property, and it's going to change the gimbal angle. So we're flying all this at 90 degrees, and then when we come and fly this space here, we're going to turn and take, I don't know what it is, like a 75 or 50 or something. I don't know. There's an angle on this that it takes on the outside so that it can get all this facade to help create that 3D image. So if you're not creating a 3D image, you're just doing a roof inspection, we're going to turn that off. And we're not going to worry so much about the live preview. That's generating maps. If you're trying to generate something maybe for search and rescue, we'll get into that stuff kind of a little bit later. That live preview kind of helps get maps out quicker. But what we are going to do is we're going to click on Advance. And we're going to turn off auto settings. So we get those auto settings turned off. And here's what we got coming down the road. A lot of our overlaps from the customers are going to be 85-85. So we're going to want to switch those. And when you see your homework assignment, it's going to have all the information. And all you're having to do is go in and put the information that's provided, adjust it, and then you're going to share this. So I'm going to show you how that works. So flight direction, we can change that flight direction. If you watch this, we can change that flight direction in any direction that we want to take it. So we go the opposite over here. We can come down, try to get 90. We can switch that where it changes direction. So you can choose north, south, east, west, what makes sense to you. Something to think about might be that if I'm standing, let's move this here. Oh, let's not do that. Let's change that flight direction. So if I've got the flight direction here and I'm standing back here, I may not have good line of sight all the way back here where the drone's going. It may be a big enough building where it may not make it all the way down and back on the battery. So one of the things that we do, what do we try to do? Come on. That's going to be close enough. In this case, all right, so now that we have it back to -90, we could stand on this side or this side, and maybe if you look here, we could actually get back to, we may get back here, and we're standing here because now we can see this shorter distance all the way across the building. So lots of different reasons why you'd want to turn that direction. And if the customer doesn't specifically tell you to turn it in a particular direction, then you can make it work what's best for you. So really this here is going to just kind of be, this is how we can change and slow it down and speed it up. This is how fast the drone's going. The default is normally perfectly fine. You'll see it set somewhere in that space when you get these kind of jobs. So don't really worry too much about that unless it asks you. Now gimbal angle is a big deal. Sometimes we're going to fly that 90 degrees down, and then sometimes for stitching, it makes better sense for us to move that to something different like 75. So you'll see some where they'll ask you to go at 75 instead of 90, and that image at an angle sometimes stitches better when it's really tough to see. All right, so now we look at this perimeter 3D, and this only works when we have the other button here. So I'm going to go Enhance 3D, and let's go back to Advanced. And so the perimeter, you see how it turns white, and then it turns color. That perimeter search, so that's going to go all the way around the edge, that only happens when we're in that mode. So same thing with crosshatch. If you're really trying to get a lot of detailed image, especially if you're doing 3D rendering, you want to do a 3D rendering of the facility, you're going to want to have this, both of them on, but this crosshatch, you see how that crosses? Look over here. Watch it cross and uncross. That's going to add images both north and south and east and west. Big difference. For what we're doing here, we're not doing 3D imaging. We're going to pop back in here. So obstacle avoidance, we're not going to talk too much about that. That's what that lever does. The sensors on your drone that keeps it from crashing into something, there may be times where you want to turn that off. Very rarely would you want to do that, but should you need to turn the obstacle avoidance off because you're traveling in some very tight areas, you at least have the ability to do that. And the showing the existing map is not something that you need to worry a whole lot about. And then the manual exposure, if you do the manual exposure, this is going to change and it's going to use the exposure in your camera instead of using an automatic exposure. So for most flights, you're going to use automatic exposure. For some certain flights, you might get your customer asking you to use a very specific ISO, and that's how you'll do that, is by turning that off. Then you'll have to go into the DJI Go app or whichever flies your drone, and you'll have to set those settings yourself. Same thing with the focus. If you're choosing for a manual focus, there are some images you don't want autofocus on. And when you do those type of images, that's what you'll do is you'll click that button, you'll go into the DJI Go app before your flight, and you will change it to manual. So you'll turn off autofocus, and that's how that's going to work. You don't have to use this button too much. You can put it on there if you feel like you want to put it on there. Pick the drone that you're going to use, but the program will automatically do that for you.